Hi everybody, it's George here, and today I have with me the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K, and I'm at Wood Carving London to make a short promo video for the company and also tell you all about this new camera while I do so. I'm about to start shooting the interview. I've got myself framed up with a nice composition that sort of shows off the whole of the studio. I'm just going to run you through a few of my settings. So firstly, I'm going to shoot in 25 frames for this project. I might switch to 50 at points if I want to get any slow motion, but obviously for the interview, I'll shoot in 25. One of the best selling points of this camera is its range of resolution. So you've got things like 6K open gate, that is 3x2, that's utilizing the entire sensor. Now this is really good if you want to reframe for socials, because you won't get basically such a wide image. You'll get a more square image, which then means that if you want to shoot something for landscape and portrait at the same time, it's a really good option. You've also then got settings like anamorphic. Now I'm not shooting on anamorphic glass, so that's not relevant to me. You've got 6K DCI, and then you've also got some Super 35 4K settings and some 4K DCI settings. Now I'm going to opt for 6K DCI for probably the majority of the shoot, or certainly at least the interview. That'll obviously give quite a nice widescreen look and that 6K resolution if I need to crop in. That helps massively because I'm shooting on a 24mm, so it's fairly wide lens. It's the only prime I've got today is this 24mm, and especially for the interview, I want to make sure I'm using a prime just to really blur out that background and use a shallow f-stop. It's also relevant because in here it's not super well lit, it's a little bit dark, so being able to shoot at 1.8 is really nice, but that actually means I don't need an ND filter, even though I'm shooting at f1.8. Unfortunately, this camera doesn't have any internal NDs like some of the other Blackmagic cameras, but that is a compromise for this little body. I just filmed 2 interviews just to cut in for the piece. It's always nice to have somebody talking overlaid over the B-roll. Now I want to talk about how this camera performed during that and why this camera was really useful. Now most notably, I'm going to shoot everything today in B-RAW, which stands for Blackmagic RAW. Now Blackmagic RAW is probably the main selling point of the Blackmagic series of cameras, and that's because it offers much of the flexibility of a RAW codec, but it actually has really good rates of compression, so the files that you get aren't going to be massive. This is really cool because most of the time when cameras shoot RAW, you're going to get huge footage files which are really difficult to manage. It's not the case with this camera. You can actually tailor it to have a variety of different bit rates and stuff, which I can tell you a little bit more about later. But the most notable thing about B-RAW is that you can change in post your white balance and your ISO. So that's so useful because today we're not working with lighting, we're not in a controlled setting. There is, we're going to be filming stuff on the fly, and it's entirely possible that I might shoot something at the wrong white balance or at the wrong ISO, and being able to change that in post is so invaluable, and I think that's really cool. One of the other benefits of this camera, which is new to the Blackmagic series of cameras, certainly of this size, is that it's full frame. That's super useful because this also isn't the hugest space. So the fact that I can shoot on a 24mm lens and it will act like a 24mm lens is super useful for capturing wides of this space. If this had a super 35mm crop, I'd struggle an awful lot more to get these really nice wides to show off the space that we're in. Right, so as I mentioned, I'm filming in B-RAW. And one of the really cool things about B-RAW is the huge range of options you have. Now, firstly, I want to talk about constant bitrate. Constant bitrate means that, as you probably guessed, the bitrate of the file will be constant. That means that the whole way through it's going to be the exact same, rather than having a variable bitrate. A variable bitrate will change as things that are happening in the image changes. So if loads of stuff starts to go on in the image and loads of stuff becomes in focus, or there's a quick motion, then the bitrate of the image will change, or the bitrate of the file will change, sorry. One of the benefits of this and having a constant bitrate means that you know exactly how big your files are going to be, which means you know exactly how quickly you're going to fill up a card, which is pretty useful. And there's a huge range of options. So we've got 3:1, 5:1, 8:1, and 12:1. This is basically the amount of compression that is going on in the file. So 3:1 will be the highest quality and have the least compression. So you'll get a huge file with loads and loads of data in there. And then 12:1 will have the lowest quality bitrate. So you can basically tailor the bitrate to exactly what you want it to be, which is super useful. I'm going to be using constant bitrate today. But you can also shoot in constant quality. Now, constant quality does the opposite. It means that the quality will be really good, and that's really focusing on the quality, but that means that the bitrate will then become variable, which then means that you might not actually know exactly how much media recording time you have left on your cards. Now, this has Q0, Q1, Q3, and Q5. Q0 is the highest quality and Q5 is the lowest quality. So if you shoot in Q0, that's basically going to be super useful for just making sure that your image looks as good as it possibly can, but that will come at a cost of burning through your media really quickly. Q5 is of course the opposite, so you'll have smaller files, a bit less quality, but much more manageable workflows when it comes to the edit. That's really exciting about this camera, because that means that actually you can cater it to the scale of your production. If you're shooting short films or commercial jobs, you can use a 3:1 constant bitrate or Q0, and you can make sure that you're getting the absolute best image possible. But if you're just a self shooter, you want a quick turnaround, you're just going to post it out on Instagram or social media or something like that, then you can shoot an 8:1, 12:1, Q3 or Q5, and you'll get that smaller file size that's much more easy to manage. We have now finished the shoot, but I just want to tell you about a few more specs of this amazing camera, because there are so many that I haven't spoken about. Now, obviously I mentioned that this is full frame. I think for me, that's the most exciting one of them all, just because it allows you to have that true look to your lenses. So exactly what they are is what they're going to do on the tin. Really useful in this small studio behind me. What I also found really useful was the amazing dynamic range that you get. You get up to 13 stops of dynamic range on this camera. There was an instance where I was filming someone inside, but there was this huge window behind and there was a lot of light flooding in through the window, and it's balanced that really nicely. I feel very confident once I get into the grade that I'll be able to push and pull and play with that image and make sure it looks really good. That's also in part due to the color science that you get from Blackmagic, which is of course really nice. You get really nice look to it. I really like that. It's quite filmic, it's quite cinematic, and it just allows for a huge amount of flexibility when color grading. This camera also has a dual native ISO, one being 400, that's the lower one, and 3200 at the higher one, just so you can make sure that you can get minimal noise images and of course utilize all of that dynamic range. I shot everything at ISO 400. I didn't need to go up to 3200 because it was dark in there, but I had some really nice fast lenses to help me with that. But of course that's really good if you want to capture those minimal noise images and make the most of the dynamic range that you get out of this body. One of my favorite things about this camera, which I'm not always used to having the privilege of using, is such a huge screen. It's a 5-inch screen on the back of the camera. Now, I typically shoot with an external monitor, and that's because I just like to see my image bigger, really make sure what's in focus and what isn't, and make sure of my composition. But I just didn't feel the need today, and that's because of that 5-inch screen. It's so much larger than a lot of its competition. That screen is also touch, and you can navigate the menus using touch, and I was a little unsure about that when I first started using it, but actually it came so naturally and the touch works really well. It's a really quick way of controlling your settings. Usually I'm not crazy about touch because the screens are so small, but because this one is much larger, that touch function is incredibly useful. Now, in terms of media, it records onto CF Express Type B, which is of course a really fast recording format. So that's really good because of these 6K features, because of the fact that you can shoot in modes with quite low compression. You're going to need a fast thing to record onto, so it's great that it's CF Express Type B. Or you can also plug in a SSD. You can do that via the USB 3 port, and that is of course really good because you can record huge amounts of media, because you can buy massive SSDs if you want to, and if you're going to edit off a drive anyway, it means that actually you don't even have to transfer it onto the drive, you've got it all there for you. But personally, I'd always recommend using a CF Express Type B, just so that you don't have any cables coming out of the camera that could become loose and could get corrupted. But of course you've got that SSD there if you want to do so. In terms of working with a Soundy, you've got lots of options because you have the ability to have time code, which of course is one of the reasons I think this camera is really well catered for short films and commercial jobs rather than just solo shooter stuff. I think it's, it's a really good mix between the two, and it has mini XLR inputs. They're mini, they're not full size, but it has two, and they both run off phantom power if your mics run off phantom, so you can run them through the camera. I've only had one battery today and I burnt through the battery pretty quickly, so I would recommend, if you are going to be using this camera for longer shoots, either buying a ton of batteries or, more importantly, running it through something else, like running it off a V-Lock battery. You're going to obviously get much better performance, especially if you're going to be running your mics on phantom. In terms of form factor, it's 1135 grams, so it's a little bit heavy for a camera, but as cinema cameras go, it's actually incredibly light. And as you can see, they've opted for the same form factor and a very similar body design to the pocket cameras. I actually would have rather this camera be a box camera because it's obviously designed, I know I haven't done it today, but it's been designed to have a lot of stuff rigged to it, have a lot of accessories, have V-locks coming out, have external monitors. You know, there's so much you can do if you want to put a matte box on it, all of that stuff. It's really well designed for this and the specs that this camera has. So I think that would have been a little bit easier to rig in a box camera, because in a box camera you don't need a cage, whereas if you wanted to rig pretty much anything to this camera, you are going to need a cage to do so. It's not a big deal, but just thought I'd give my piece on that one. But for me, it's the codecs, and the huge range of options. The fact that you can choose from so many different resolutions, so many different aspect ratios, the fact that it has open gate is exceptional. I just think it's really flexible. I love the fact that you can choose between quality or bitrate, and I love that you can have so much control over the exact quality of your image or the exact bitrate of your image. As I say, I can really see people using it on larger productions, music videos, stuff like that. That's because of that lack of compression and the amazing B-roll that it shoots in, which I'm sure if anybody's used any recent Blackmagic cameras, you know exactly how good that is and how well it partners with Resolve. But that's it from me today. I've really enjoyed using the camera. If you have any questions about the camera, then pop them down below and I'll get back to you. And of course, here is the video that I made just so you can check it out and see exactly what this camera is capable of.
We are Wood Carving London. We specialise in making hand-carved objects. We do reproduction, restoration, lettering, and we also do some contemporary designs.
So for furniture, for all sorts of interiors, sculptural pieces, all sorts of stuff. We've been working out of this space for about 6 years now.
We're based in Peacock Yard,
just below Elephant and Castle, in an amazing Victorian mews.
I've worked with wood for many, many years. We're using all traditional joinery methods.
We're kind of competing with CNC machines and stuff these days, but you can really tell the difference when something's done by a chisel and kind of see the energy that's gone into it, I think, compared to more modern techniques done by machine.
I've always been very passionate about working with wood, and I love the idea of mixing that with being much more creative.
I love the infinite kind of nature of the different timbers, the way they age, they live on and change in time. We are working for a private client who's asked if we can do a replica set of the Lewis chessmen. They're actually ivory, the originals, that were found in the Outer Hebrides, and we are carving them in boxwood, which she cut down on her property. It's quite romantic, really.